news about the youth program. I think that's awesome. And what a great idea, because it is a missing element that we have in our group. And so I think that's fantastic.
Yep.
And thank you, Fluka's family, for standing up to do that. You'll be the perfect conduit for that.
Yep.
We gotta go in here again.
Are you guys ready?
Okay.
Can you hear us?
Yeah.
Let's pray.
Dear Father in heaven, we come before you as a group. We ask for your presence. We pray that you will spend time with us, that you will fill us all with your Holy Spirit, that you will open our hearts, our minds, our ears, and our eyes, that we may see and hear and understand and know your truth and your message. We pray that you will bless the lips of the presenter, that only the truth comes forth, and that it will come forth in such a way that it's clear and concise and easy to understand. We're going over the Diadochi Wars, and they're complicated for us, and we're having a hard time putting them to memory and connecting all the dots. So we pray that you will please help us to understand the wars, World War I, World War II, the Diadochi Wars, and how it applies on our line. Help us to see the messages, the information that you want us to understand, to see what's coming, that we may become prepared. For we know that you always tell your servants what's coming. We pray that we will be ready and standing on the right side of the line under your truth by November 9th, on November 9th. And in the meantime, we pray that you will help us to pass all our tests, and that our hearts are open and intertwined, our minds, our thoughts intertwined with you, and that we can be in unity with each other. We praise you, Lord God, and we thank you for your presence and all your blessings. And we pray in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, in the precious name of our Lord and Savior, Yeshua. Amen.
Amen.
Okay. You want me to start with just sharing?
Right. So good evening, everybody. Okay, now you guys should see our document coming up.
You're going to skip the recap part, the first paragraph.
Alrighty. And my presentation today is on the Third Diadochi War. And she's focusing on that because of Antigonus, and but we'll get into it, and you'll see what I'm talking about. So we have thought all year about the Fourth Diadochi War and the subsequent conflict with Demetrius. It's known as the Antigonid dynasty. We noted the united effort of our four famous generals when they came together as allies. They only could equal the power of Antigonus and Demetrius. they were the superpower of the history, but they reached that superpower status not at the Fourth Diadochi War, but at the end of the Second and the beginning of the Third. That's when the King of the North becomes a superpower, aka Antigonus. And I am quoting here from his heritagehistory.com. The Fourth Diadochi War was just a continuation of the Third. Antigonus and his son Demetrius were at war simultaneously with Ptolemy and in the south, and Seleucus in the east, and Lysimachus in the north. So we have made a point and can see the pattern of World War I and World War II illustrated in the histories of the Third and the Fourth Diadochi War. World War I and World War II are the same key players, just as in the Third and Fourth Diadochi. Antigonus against the Allies, Germany, Hitler against the Allies. So what we want to study is the Third War of the Diadochi. So in the Second War, Antigonus had a key threat. He was already powerful, but he had a rival, and his rival was Eumenes. So for some time, there has been an ongoing war between Antigonus and Eumenes. Eumenes was one of the most powerful generals of the time. At this point, the most powerful general of the East. Eumenes went east and united with all the Eastern generals against Antigonus. Eumenes was powerful. In his army was the most elite fighting force of Alexander the Great, as known as the Silver Shields. Antigonus and Eumenes have had this drawn-out war, and it all comes to a climax in the Battle of Gaza. At this battle, Antigonus and Eumenes meet. I want to note that in the lead up to this battle, and in this battle, Antigonus has two allies, two other generals on his side supporting Antigonus. In this war are the two generals Python and Seleucus. Just note who is the king of the north. Now you have a problem, because you can see Seleucus and you can see Antigonus. Because we know we are calling Antigonus the king of the north. Now Eumenes starts traveling east. As he travels east, he has to cross a river, and Seleucus and Python attack him. They attempt to take his baggage train. Eumenes barely escapes. Eumenes tries to create a relation with Seleucus, but Seleucus won't accept him. He rejects his authority and attacks him. So prior to the Battle of Gaza, Python and Seleucus are aiding Antigonus. In this battle, Python fights in the Battle of Antigonus. He wins his portion of the battle. So in the Second War of the Diadochi, you see those two superpowers, Antigonus and Eumenes. Antigonus has two allies, Python and Seleucus, and Python is fighting in his army and helps him win this war. Now in this battle, there is no obvious winner or losers. What happens is there's an elephant charge. As the elephants charge each other at the beginning of the battle, a dust storm is created. As the elephants charge against Eumenes, there is a dust storm that covers the field of battle. Antigonus sends men around the field of battle behind Eumenes and takes his baggage train. We mentioned that elite fighting force, silver shields. The battle is irrelevant. What Eumenes loses and what the men lose is everything they've ever earned from all their wars. The silver shields are old men at this stage. Everything that they have fought for is taken away by Antigonus. Their families are taken by him, so Antigonus makes them an offer. Turn on your leader and offer him to me, and I will give you back your belongings and your families. And subsequently they do. So regardless of the outcome of the battle, it's irrelevant. What decided the end of the war is Antigonus defeating Eumenes from the inside by taking his baggage train. He defeats him by the inside by encouraging Eumenes' own men to surrender him. They surrender Eumenes and Antigonus kills him. At this point, Antigonus takes up that superpower status, as we mentioned. He is unrivaled in the area of Greek world. At this point, he takes the title of Master of Asia, or the Master of the East. He has no real rival, and you can say that he is unilateral. Okay, two key points from this battle. Eumenes is defeated from the inside, and the only reason that he can be defeated from the inside is because Antigonus' actions are covered by the charge of the elephants. Elephants decided the outcome of the war, of that war. This already begins to fit our theme. After he has defeated his only rival, Antigonus begins to consider himself as master of Asia. He begins to act in a dictatorial fashion. He begins to go to these weaker generals and either forces them to surrender to him or he kills them. He starts to kill these weaker generals in the east. And I want us to remember that prior to this battle, Seleucus has gained control of Babylon. He owed his position in Babylon directly to Antigonus because they are allies. But when Antigonus starts to act like a dictator, Seleucus starts to worry about his position and his safety. It comes to the point where Antigonus kills his ally Python. Remember, Python had helped him win this war. He fought in his army, but Antigonus started to act like a unilateral dictator. He kills Python and other generals. All this worries Seleucus, so he gives up Babylon. This is before we ever mark the beginning of the Seleucid dynasty. He had control of Babylon, and he surrenders it and then flees to Ptolemy in Egypt. He says to Ptolemy, "Can you see what Antigonus is doing? Now he's a threat to everyone. Now our generals begin to become worried." And quoting from A.T. Jones here, after the death of Eumenes, Antigonus considered himself master of all Asia. He began to destroy all governors who possessed any considerable ability, of whom Python was one. He attempted to destroy Seleucus with the others, but Seleucus escaped and went to Ptolemy and showed him what Antigonus was designing, and also sent information to Lysimachus, Cassander, to the same effect. The result was that a league was formed in 314 BC. Of these four were Seleucus, Ptolemy, Lysimachus, and Cassander against Antigonus. So this is right here between the Second and the Third Diadochi War. Antigonus has become a superpower, and our four generals are in a league: Seleucus, Ptolemy, Lysimachus, and Cassander. And I want to make a point. I don't agree with this phrasing. There is a league formed. A.T. Jones says four, but at this point, Seleucus is a nobody. The enemies are threefold. Seleucus has no territory. He has no army. Now he is just a general in Ptolemy of Ptolemies. He has given up Babylon. The threat Antigonus faces is three allies: Ptolemy, Lysimachus, and Cassander. With Seleucus working for Ptolemy, but he has no power of his own, these three allies write an ultimatum. They send the ultimatum to Antigonus, and what it says is, "You have won a battle. You have taken all that power to yourself, all the land and all the riches. We want you to surrender some of that power and share it amongst us, or else there'll be war." The three allies are ordering Antigonus to share his newfound power. Antigonus responds to this by immediately going to war. This was the beginning of the Third Diadochi War, and Antigonus invades Syria. We have talked quite a lot in the last year about the area called Cold Syria. And this is the area that Antigonus invades. This area of Syria has been under a sphere of influence and is not under direct rule of Ptolemy. So he is attacking the sphere of influence of the king of the south. He secures Syria. Syria takes over its naval resources and lays siege to Tyre. He is not attacking Egypt directly. These were independent areas, but they are supported by Ptolemy under his sphere. And I put a map up here so you guys can take a look to see the different areas that each general is control of. And where the cursor is, you can see Cold Syria, which is further north, to where these guys are all at right now. And I really like the map because it kind of, you can read all day and talk about it, but when you actually can see the different territories, it kind of puts a little perspective to where you can look at it. Okay, down in the area of the world south of Syria, Antigonus has conquered that all the way. He leaves his son Demetrius there to defend what he had just won, while Antigonus travels to conquer other areas in the north. Ptolemy leads his army out of Egypt to confront Demetrius. This is the first battle Demetrius ever fights without his father, and he is surrounded by counselors. Those advisors tell Demetrius not to fight Ptolemy. If he tries to fight Ptolemy, he's going to lose. Note that Seleucus is fighting for Ptolemy in that battle. Demetrius ignores the advice of his generals and fights anyways. It is known as the Battle of Gaza. Demetrius' army was crushed. Ptolemy defeats him, absolutely crushes him. Then Ptolemy marches north to take back his territory. The Battle of Gaza and the location of Gaza can be known as a different name, Raphia. It is the same place. So if you search for the Battle of Raphia in history, you may find it named the Battle of Gaza. It is the same location at this point. It looks like Antigonus and Demetrius are losing. Demetrius has been pushed back. Ptolemy has reconquered his territory, but then Antigonus marches back south. He comes down and joins his son and starts to push Ptolemy back towards Egypt. I'll read a quote here from A.T. Jones. Shortly afterwards, however, Demetrius defeated Ptolemy's general, and immediately Antigonus joins him, and together they recover all the hollow Syria, Phoenicia, and Palestine. As Ptolemy is driven back, Antigonus recaptures all the territory he has lost right up to the borders of Egypt. So Antigonus comes back and takes back all that he had lost from Ptolemy to the borders of Egypt. He is about to invade Egypt when he is distracted. There are two distractions at this point in time. One of them is the Nabateans. These are a tribe from the east that's starting to harass the army of Antigonus. The Nabateans are the descendants of Ishmael. They have been ranging in that territory, and it is believed that they conferred their name into the nations of the Arabia. So there are two things disturbing Antigonus and preventing him from going past the border. The first is the Nabateans, and the second is the action of Seleucus. Seleucus on Ptolemy's side at the Battle of Gaza. After the battle is won, Seleucus sees his opportunity. He takes his army and goes and takes back Babylon and takes back his throne. Because of these two threats, Antigonus goes to those allies. Neither side has won. They sign what is known as the Peace of Dynast. It is a peace treaty. This is the peace treaty that postponed the war until the Fourth Diadochi War started in 307 BC. This is the break in the middle between the third and the fourth. It enables Antigonus to deal with his two threats, primarily Seleucus. After the Peace of Dynast, And after the Third Diadochi War begins, afterward. Oh, okay. Let me say that again. After the peace of that dynasty, and after the Third Diadochi War begins, the Babylonian War. Okay, I think there's a typo in there.
They're supposed to
Yeah. It is a struggle for the power between Antigonus and Seleucus. Seleucus, and it marks the beginning of the Seleucid dynasty in 309 BC. This is where he becomes established. This peace treaty they sign, the idea behind it is that they would all make peace until the son of Alexander the Great has grown to such an age that he could become king and take over for his father. They all are still pretending that they are all only babysitting that territory. When they decide when they decide on that, Cassander has given the position of protecting Alexander's family. He sees that threat is real, so he has Alexander's son and the son's mother, Roxanne, killed. At this point, you would mark the end of the Argead dynasty, the dynasty of Alexander the Great. Now there is no hope for the successor for Alexander. So up until this point, is there any questions? Any remarks? Alrighty then. So I will do a short review. The end of the Second War, Antigonus has two allies, Python and Seleucus. But when he wins, his attitude changes and he begins to act as the master of Asia, or a global dictator. He begins to turn on all his generals underneath him and kill anyone that may threaten his power. He no longer recognizes Seleucus as an equal, and Seleucus flees to Ptolemy. The three generals, Cassander, Lysimachus, and Ptolemy, send the ultimatum to Antigonus. Share your power, or we will fight you. He won't share, and instead he begins to take over the sphere of influence of Ptolemy. He leaves his son protecting that newfound territory. Ptolemy defeats his son at the Battle of Gaza, or the Battle of Raphia. Antigonus fights back and takes back the territory up to the border of Egypt. He could have taken Egypt, but he was distracted. The Nabateans and Seleucus had snuck behind his back and taken Babylon, so that he makes a peace treaty with the allies and Ptolemy in Egypt and fights Seleucus for power. He loses Babylon to Seleucus. Seleucus establishes his dynasty in Babylon in the year 309 BC. This is the history of the Third Diadochi War. And then we have this history of the Babylonian War. You have an ongoing war between the king of the north and his number one threat or rival. That war is the U.S. against Soviet Union. In this war, the U.S. had two allies fighting for them. The CIA called the CIA called Operation Cyclone, leading up to the end of the war. They are armed and fighting with the Mujahideen, fighting for them in this war in Afghan. Using the Mujahideen working in Afghan, they were weakening the Soviet Union. When they finally defeat the Soviet Union, it isn't in an open battle. The Soviet Union was overthrown from the inside. And to defeat them from the inside, what did the US use? Many of us have in the last month been watching documentaries or going through different sources covering this early history. We have been able to identify that the war currently being fought now is an information war. We can defend that. It's characterized in prophecy through the history of pirates by the use of elephants. Another evidence that it is an information war, if you go to the time of the end, in 1989, the war is fought in an information war, using information, using those tactics that the US overthrew the Soviet Union from the inside. They took their baggage cart, they weakened their economy, they convinced the people to overthrow their leadership. In this effort to weaken the economy and to undermine the leadership, they have two allies, the Mujahideen, who became the Taliban, and the Vatican. The papacy and John Paul II, Antigonus is the king of the north in this history. But what about Seleucus? So in this history, you have the US and the papacy. You have the defeat of the US. You have the defeat of the US from the inside with two allies. As we were looking, we were discussing the US behavior just after this victory. They saw themselves as master of Asia, a world superpower, and they started to overthrow and destroy any rival. What do they do to their former allies? The Mujahideen become the Taliban, and overthrow the government of Afghanistan in 1996. They take power in Afghanistan at 9/11. We know the terrorist attack, but in this history, what does the US do to their former allies? They attack Afghanistan and begin to overthrow the Taliban government. So we talked about September 11, November 9, 2001 is the first battle in the Afghan war. In this battle, they overthrow the Taliban in the city. So in 2001, the US invades Afghanistan. They overthrow the Taliban, the same allies that 10 years earlier had been fighting on their behalf. Okay, and the quoting here, it can be argued that the invasion of Afghanistan is not legal under the international law. You can detail while that is the case in international law. No permission had been given, but what begins to happen in this alliance or relationship between John Paul II and the U.S. I think we all thought that in the past that they are all coming together in 2001. Historically, that is not the case. Historically, by this stage, what side was John Paul II on? As soon as the 1989 wall falls in Berlin, the U.S. no longer needs papacy. They turn on John Paul II. And as the U.S. starts to act like a dictator, John Paul II turns on them. This in the New York Times on April 1st, 1991. John Paul II delivered a scathing denunciation of the Persian Gulf War today, calling it darkness that he had cast a shadow over the human community. This is George Bush's war against Iraq that was testing the New World Order. John Paul II called him, and he even sent an ambassador. He said George Bush did not attack Iraq. What was George Bush's response? Is you were useful against the Soviet Union. I don't need you anymore. Who are you to tell me what to do? John Paul says. Okay, and there's a quote from John Paul. It says, "A choice was made of aggression and the violation of international law when it was presumed to solve the tension between the peoples by war, the sower of death," he says in this Easter Sunday message. Throughout the Gulf War, John Paul made this opposition abundantly plain, and several times the Vatican expressed frustrations over the futility of papal appeals for peace. From his remarks today, it was equally clear that the anti-war stance had not eased in the months that had passed since the guns were silenced. America has already begun to attack like an unilateral power. It's already affecting their alliance with the papacy. 2001, the U.S. invades Afghanistan. Again, the Pope speaks. Without mentioning the United States or the Afghan by name, he says he has in the past that there is a right to defend oneself against terrorism. But he also said that only terrorists themselves, not entire nations, should be called to account. Again, he is speaking out against the U.S. Then comes 2003. Now the U.S. wants to invade Iraq. Pope John Paul II expresses the strongest opposition yet. And he says it will defeat for humanity. He says no to the war. Pope John Paul II today expressed his strongest opposition yet to a potential war in Iraq, describing it as defeat for humanity and urging world leaders to try to resolve disputes with Iraq through diplomatic means. No war, the Pope said during his annual address to scores of diplomatic emissaries to the Vatican, and an exhortation that refers to in part to Iraq, a country he mentioned twice.
Oh, question. We watched a thing today about how America became the superpower, and it was talking about, was it UN or NATO? I think it was the UN. That when it was built, it was put together like a League of Nations to keep Russia from growing into power, and one of their rules was to, when it came to war, no one was allowed to go to war for territory gains or anything like that. But I thought it was interesting that they went against the UN and those rules to take territory away.
I think that was NATO, Adriana.
Was it NATO? Okay.
It was NATO with Russia.
Okay. So yeah, so they literally were hypocritical because the US brought, NATO in to keep Russia out of everything, and then they went and took territory away from Russia like Russia used to do against. That's crazy. I thought it was really weird. But that's where we are in a hypocritical country.
Yeah, I think when it's our country being attacked, and then we take different methods, other than what we say.
We take the bully stance.
Yeah, we take the bully stance.
Yeah, I was watching these videos today about how the news cycles, doesn't matter which, CNN, Fox, whichever you want, when they portray us in war in other countries, like they did probably with this war, I don't remember, but all they did was show the what is it, Moab, the mother of all bombs, the Tom,
right.
what was his name, Tom, whatever the name of that bomb was. But they kept talking about it and showing cool clips of what it looks like and how it looks like when it's fired into air and all of this. They weren't focusing on the destruction it causes in other countries, but they were looking at these wonderful weapons the United States has and look at our military power and da-da-da. Meanwhile, there's people dying in other countries. And then you have those countries come here and do the same thing here, and it's like, who are these horrible human beings and with no morals? How dare they do this? And I'm like, who are you? Who are you talking to? It's unbelievable. Like, the more I look into this, the more I look into American history and what they've been doing abroad, the more I am shocked at just how unbelievably not fair it is what they do.
And I think it's growing too. Even Trump has choice words for people that go against us. He talks about weapons that they don't know that we have, kind of thing, and idle threats and things like that. But yeah, it's just really crazy.
Yeah, it's scary, and it's hard to talk to people because no one knows history, and you don't see any of this unless you actually study the history and look at everything. So I have coworkers that I try to tell them these things, and they look at me like I'm crazy because all they know is what their news channel told them. They don't know any history, so they don't know. And to try to teach them history in 10 minutes, it's not going to happen.
Right.
And so when I try to shorten it and I try to tell them everything that the U.S. has done, they look at me like I'm the one spouting conspiracy theories.
Oh.
It's crazy. And I'm like, I'm just condensing history. It's so frustrating. I don't know how. It literally, if they don't see it and if they're not undergoing the work that they need to through the external events for us to get to them, it's like it doesn't work. They have to go through their line.
Right.
It's so weird. Hard to reach. I don't know. Really weird.
I've been thinking about that today when it comes to my family, because I have some staunch Trump supporters in Fox News family, and I started to really think about it, that is the plowing. And if the plowing doesn't do the work, it doesn't do the work, and the seed doesn't get planted. And I thought about that a lot today. It's kind of sad when you really think about it.
It is, and it's such a serious thing, and I don't think we realize, like, it is.
Yeah.
This is their moment. But then I have hope, because it wasn't until the latter rain portion of this movement that I wiggled my way in here and came out of, late, even in this section, out of conservatism. So I'm hoping that there's hope.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but the priests are a strange exception. So I don't know.
Well, we know the Levites come from the church, so there are those that come. So
Yeah.
they'd probably be the ones that know that something's wrong. You know, they've known something's wrong for a long time.
Yeah.
That's a lot to do with it, but I don't know what to the conservative.
And Antigonus is you know, the more I read about Antigonus, the more I see Trump in them and Hitler and people like that. You know, they start eliminating anybody that has any kind of threat against them or power against them. They just start eliminating them one by one.
Yeah, and he wants that whistleblower.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's now it's getting ugly. It's getting real ugly.
Yeah, we might want to keep that whistleblower in our prayers because he's I don't know that he's really trying to find him now. What's he going to do with him if he finds him? I just think we should keep him in our prayers.
Yeah. I watched a press. Someone was getting sworn in, and while that was happening, Trump was saying that I want to find this whistleblower. Now everyone knows that he made false accusations. My conversation with the president of Ukraine was perfect. Everyone sees that now, and we just need to find this whistleblower. And I'm like, you crazy.
Right.
It's amazing that when he talks like that, I get that his base believes him, but it's amazing that he talks so boldly that he's always done that. And he talks the opposite of what we all see.
Right.
He's doing the very same things that he's saying others are doing. Did anybody see that? Is the guy's name Flake? Is that his name, Flake? The Republican back in the Kavanaugh hearings that stepped out of rank with the Republicans.
Oh, that what's the name from Arizona?
Yeah, what's his name? Flake. It starts.
Yeah, Flake. His
Okay.
last name is Flake.
Did anybody see what he's saying today?
No.
That I may not say it right, but he's calling for the Republicans to stand up according to principle, not for their job like he did, because he didn't get reelected, and they need to choose for principle, and then to save their soul. Basically, I think that's what he said, to save your soul.
So that's a good thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good thing.
Awesome.
There's people on the inside that
Yay.
know that this is wrong,
Yay.
and he's a Republican.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I was watching CNN and they were talking to some of the people in the Senate and all that, and he was saying that if they held like a secret vote, that he could assure that at least 35 Republicans would sign an impeachment against Trump. He goes, but they're so scared that they won't outright, stand up and take that stance.
Yeah, they're totally in fear. They got to be in fear. I mean, look at the way he talks about the whistleblower, and the ones that gave the information to the whistleblower calls them spies and saying that they ought to be executed.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's crazy. It's starting to heat up again, so I don't know. And I was telling Christine that that one gal that was going to go over to Israel, and Trump blocked her entry over there. That one gal from New York.
Congresswoman or
Yeah, I think she's a
senator.
I think she's a senator.
I can't think of her name.
But she's starting to print out T-shirts that say "Impeach the MF" to build up money for the Democratic campaign.
I'm pretty sure she's Congress.
Congress.
She's
Okay.
Congress.
Yeah.
Something Tlaib, Congresswoman Tlaib. I forget.
Yeah, that's her.
Yeah.
I go, well, she's really putting herself out there. Now he's really going to target her.
Yeah, I mean, she's kind of making a really big mistake because she's thinking that it's a done deal, and it's nowhere, according to the lines, it's nowhere done.
They don't know the lines though. They don't.
Exactly, they don't know the lines, and she's thinking it's a done deal. He's impeached. I'm like, no, it's not.
Yeah, this makes me wonder about November 9 because Rafia will end there, and so you'll have the United States and Trump losing, but you're also going to have him be less restrained.
Right.
So I don't know how that's going to look like. I don't know if the impeachment inquiry and everything is going to be finished today, because it's apparently, if you guys see that list on the devotional thing, there's a bunch of presidents that this has happened to, not just two, just this first initial step of impeachment inquiry.
Oh, for real?
Yeah, for a long, like a list of them. Both George Bush's was on there, and one of them was on there even when he was vice president. They did another impeachment inquiry on him. Obama was too, which I don't remember that, but apparently they were looking into that for him, and a bunch of other ones. But it didn't go past step 2 because you need, 3 green check marks. They got the first one. Like there's a long list of the ones who got that one, but then the second one was only Bill Clinton and Andrew Johnson. And Nixon left before any check mark happened. He just knew it wasn't going to work out because the Republicans told him, like, we can't help you. It's over. So he left. But yeah, there was a whole list of them. So we'll see how far it goes and how that works, because I don't know how fast they're going to do it. If Nancy Pelosi can get it expedited, maybe it will be by the end of this year. But if not, then it probably takes a long time. I don't know. For Nixon, but just talking about it took like a year, because it was, if you look at the timeline, it was a long time.
Wow.
Wasn't it even on that list? Was it Ulysses S. Grant? The one, was he on it too? Because I know there was a general.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he was.
When he was a president for a little bit.
Oh, was he? Okay.
Yeah. And he was looked into being impeached. But this type of impeachment thing happens when you get a really big polarization of the country, right?
Right.
And tensions start running high. And I think that's why we have the lines that take us back to those history, and they just match perfectly with our 151 and 126 and everything. And it just takes us right back to all the other times in the United States history where everything became polarized over these big issues, and you had crazy presidents in charge that did crazy things. So
based on the lines of what we know, then he's got to at least get the first check, but he won't get the third one.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if this is one of those unprecedented situations where it actually happens, but if we go based off of what it's pointing back to, I don't think he gets a Senate vote. I don't think he gets removed.
Maybe there won't be time.
But it makes sense if the Senate doesn't remove him. I think it was John who was saying this before. This is your one shot to impeach him. If you don't get him after this, no one's going to take any kind of impeachment inquiry seriously again ever. So he's going to be like unstoppable.
Right. Exactly.
So this is the one chance they get.
This is the fuel.
Yep. And he's going to point back to this too, to say if he doesn't get impeached, that he's going to be like, do you see how they tried? Do you see how they tried to do their little witch hunt? You see how they failed? I'm unstoppable. Nothing can stop me. And then everyone's going to be afraid of him, because if Republicans see that nothing can stop him, then who's going to say no to him anymore?
Exactly.
And I think in the Nixon impeachment, he actually used the same terms, the witch hunt and all that, when he was going through his impeachment.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not something new, that Trump's saying. He's using the same old, same kind of rhetoric and all that kind of stuff.
Well, him and Nixon have kind of a lot in common, because Nixon was trying to smuggle his way into the Democratic Party and break in there because he wanted to get reelected, wasn't it?
Right.
He wanted to get some dirt or something to win the next election. Didn't Trump have his buddy Putin do that with the DNC?
Yeah.
You had some similar characteristics happen there, and it's also with Andrew Johnson. You had a huge fight between him and his government. They didn't like him, and Trump has that. Clinton lied under oath, and they hated that he did that, and he was trying to be a liar. And Trump, it's not disputed that he lies. It's clear. It's like all culminating in one super horrible person. So
Yeah, I think it's going to get worse before it gets better.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Any other comments? Any questions?
Do you guys have the lines?
I don't have it up. This one or the other one? The other one.
Because I got confused for a second until I looked at this. Because you know how we say we switch the battles, but you have Antigonus invade Syria, and you have the king of the north going against king of the south, and you'd have to flip it. It would make the wrong. But that's not. I keep getting confused. These waymarks aren't the same waymarks. It's not the same waymarks like the two ones in the middle here, 2003. Both of those, they go between waymarks on our line. So when you guys look at applications, make sure you keep an eye out for that.
Explain. I don't understand what you're saying.
So the line that we have, it goes 1989, 9/11. We have 2014, which is Sunday law, and then 2019, right? 2016, there was the election. But here, the two waymarks that you don't have 2014 on here. You don't have 2016 on here. You have Rafi and Panium. So it goes from 9/11 to Rafi and Panium from our old line. These two waymarks between that are both 2003. So they're new waymarks. So that's what these two, Diadochi War and World War I, added. They added two new waymarks.
Okay.
Which is good to keep in mind when you look at this. I just wanted to say that if it's okay.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't we're looking at here 2003, the ultimatum? Isn't that the same year that U.S. invaded Iraq?
Yeah, it
Yes.
was later on in the year that yeah.
So this right here, the USA invades Iraq, that's 2003. Both of these are.
So it's two waymarks?
Yeah,
Same.
but they're, yeah, right, Adriana?
Yeah, it's
Both
two
of these
different
two are
waymarks.
2003.
Yep.
So first they give him the ultimatum, telling him not to go to war, but he does it anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
And I've seen her do it on other charts. She puts the same year, but she puts two different marks on them.
Yeah, because you have that for World War I too, because you have the terrorist attack, and then exactly 1 month later, the same year, you have the invasion of Serbia. And on World War II, I'm pretty sure we had something similar also, where you have a couple waymarks in the same year, if I remember correctly.
Gotcha. Okay.
Somewhere I remember that. Anyways.
Cool.
Thank you for the info.
Yeah, thank you for explaining that.
Little bit by little bit.
Yeah, just taking our time. We'll get it. We'll get it.
Okay, let me start here. So we're talking about the Pope and his frustration with the U.S. about going to war. So this ties into he sends an ambassador to both George Bush and to Saddam Hussein.
The Pope did.
Yeah. He publicly appealed for a peace agreement. He said, "I have one or two things to say to President Bush about the war and peace. Peace must be gained with active participation in the international community, and in particular, the United Nations." What's his concern? The U.S. from this point forward is acting unilaterally. That does not work in the favor of the papacy. In 2003, the U.S. wants to invade Iraq. We discussed before the position of the UN, United Nations, in that in the United Nations there were three preliminary countries opposing them. Huh?
Primary.
Oh, primary countries opposing them. Excuse me. Those three countries gave the U.S. an ultimatum. The three countries were Russia, Germany, and France. They told the U.S., if you try to invade Iraq through a UN bill, we will veto that bill. We are not going to give you permission. Quoting from The Guardian, from that history, France, Russia, and Germany raised the stakes in their defiance of Washington's war plans. They made a joint vow that a resolution authorizing war would not be passed through the United Nations Security Council. It is spoken of as the Antiwar axis. Quoting from the French minister, Russia and France will assume all of our responsibilities on this point. France is totally on the same side as the Russians. And those three European powers held an emergency meeting in Paris to try to present a united front against the U.S., saying we will not allow the resolution to pass that authorizes resorting to force. We all know that the U.S. went to war anyways. The following year, the Secretary General of the United Nations was asked if that war was illegal. Yes, from our point of view, from the point of view of the Charter of the United Nations, it was illegal. The U.S. invaded Iraq. Iraq, whose sphere of influence did Iraq come under? All through the history of the Cold War, Iraq came under the sphere of influence of Russia. The Soviet Union were the main suppliers of Saddam Hussein's weapons. Even after the fall of the Soviet Union, they still considered Iraq as a sphere of influence, which is why Gorbachev tried to prevent the Gulf War. Quoting from a news report, many people observing believe Russia's policy is motivated by a desire to restrain the U.S. global domination and the U.S. tendency for unilateralism. The idea that a multipolar war, globalism, in which Russia can still be a major player, still has strong appeal in Russia. This is under Putin's government. Thus, Russia has an interest in opposing unilateral U.S. military actions. He partnered with France and Germany to limit U.S. power, especially its tendency to unilateral power acting as a global policeman. So you see Russia in this history of 2003 already opposing the U.S. again. Quoting, Russia has an interest in promoting a multipolar war. There were documents released after the invasion of Iraq that they demonstrated was that in the early days of that invasion, Russia collected inside information on the movement of the U.S. and fed it through to Saddam Hussein. They funneled intelligence on American troop movement during the early days of the war through Saddam Hussein. That was the report released by the Pentagon. and they were doing all this because Iraq, under the sphere of influence of Russia, even after the Gulf War, Russia had propped up Iraq's economy to where they had a great deal of ownership over Iraq, and Iraq owed them a great deal of money. We have invasion of Iraq in 2003. There is a war over spheres of influence. At the Battle of Gaza, also known as the Battle of Rafah, you see the King of the South, Russia, taking back its spheres of influence. Again, these battles are about spheres of influence. Then we know coming to Panium, the US is going to strike back. Just like 1989 through 1991. How far do they go to Panium? They are going to go only to the borders. They won't go inside Russia. Again, they are talking the spheres of influence and they are distracted. You have the descendants of Ishmael. You also have a rising up of another power. You have to consider the role of the Vatican has played in the last 30 years. Our idea that there is some kind of friendship between the US and the Vatican is old news. There is 3 decades since the alliance of that alliance had ended 3 decades ago. Instead, throughout this history, the papacy has not been America's friend or ally because America was acting unilaterally. We come to our history and we have Pope Francis, and he is not a friend of Donald Trump. In 2016, he is not kind to Donald Trump. He was the first Pope at Concord, and that's Concord Unity, to meet the Russian Patriarch in about 400 years. He has developed a close relationship with Vladimir Putin. Just recently, Pope Francis made a statement. He called for the united Europe, for a united Europe. He said this just in the last couple of weeks. I am concerned because we hear the speeches that resemble those of Hitler in 1934, he said. US, us first, we. There are frightening thoughts, I'm sorry. What did we just do? The Pope stole our message. We are the ones saying that we are in 1934 Germany, the rising up of Hitler, aka Donald Trump. We are hearing Hitler's speeches at Trump's campaign rallies. We are seeing the rise of nationalism. Pope Francis has said immigrants need to be integrated into society. Nationalism is an attitude of isolation. There is a dangerous rising tide of populism. In 2017, asked Pope Francis about populism, he points them back to World War II. He says before World War II, there were people immersed in a crisis. These people were searching for an identity until this charismatic leader came and promised to give them their identity back. He gave them a distorted identity, and we all know what happened. What is Pope Francis doing? He's sharing our message. It's our message that says that there is a rising tide of populism. People were looking for an identity. They found a charismatic leader who gave them all who gave them all their promises and gave them back a distorted identity. Those speeches resembled Hitler and brought them to World War II. We need to reconsider our thoughts and how Pope Francis is working. We can see what side is Seleucus on. He is on Antigonus' side up to this point, the Battle of Gaza, and no further. So when we see the papacy in our day, it shouldn't surprise us that his relationship with Trump is a little tense. But I would suggest that we see some indication of how he benefits from these events. Apart from that, you see, he is not a friend of America in these years. If anything, he is making friends with the King of the South. But we know the end result. When we talk about the counterfeit, it might be closer than we thought. We are warning the world that Trump is Hitler. Pope Francis has been given the same message, but he is not the true. He is not the true. He is the counterfeit. That counterfeit closer to the path of the truth than we realize. And thank you, and that's my presentation. Do we have any comments or any questions?
I thought it was interesting that the Pope said we have to integrate immigrants, but we used to look at that as a conspiracy theory to bring Catholics into the U.S. to take it over.
Right.
But it wasn't. He just.
So that they would vote Democrat too.
Yeah, which now we're, crazy how in just a year everything changed.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because they have a Democrat in the Supreme Court Justice and a Democrat in the White House. You know, you got the that new Supreme Court Justice. He's a Catholic, and then you got the Vice President Pence.
So have we completely, like, is the papacy completely discarded from the picture now? Like, I'm still unsure if that's what's been said.
I don't think so, because he's Seleucus.
Yeah, he's coming back at Sunday Law.
Yeah.
Because right now he's partnering with this King of the South, so he's Seleucus.
So would it be out of the question that he actually is, that maybe they do have the intention to flood America with Catholics, even though that's not going to help bring in the Sunday Law, because we know Trump's going to bring in the Sunday Law. Catholics aren't going to vote for Trump. But you think the papacy must still have an agenda, and they're not a good guy. So I'm still confused about the papacy, because I don't really know. It seems like we're focused on Protestantism right now, and it's like we're kind of unclear what the papacy's role is in the end. Or maybe it's just me.
No, I'm there with you, John.
Okay, good.
Yeah, no, I'm there. But no matter what the lines say, I mean, I'm not going against the lines, but what I'm saying is the Catholic Church isn't going to change any more than they've ever. So they've always had an agenda to rule the world themselves, as Catholics, and they're still going to continue that. It just might not look like the way they think it's going to look like.
Is the papacy? I'm missing. Obviously, you guys will know this from this study, but for some reason, it's still not clicking for me. Are they still part of the King of the North, or is it just the U.S. right now that is the King of the North?
Yeah, that's weird. I was thinking about that today, and to me, it seemed like it was just Donald Trump in the U.S. I don't know, but I can be totally wrong. But to me, I don't know. I was looking at it today, and I don't know. What about you, Elaine? Anybody?
Based off of Diadochi War 3, Seleucus, when he flees from Antigonus, because Antigonus starts acting like a dictator, and Seleucus leaves his territory behind. He's not considered a general anymore. He's just, well, not a general, but like a king like Ptolemy, Cassandra, and Lysimachus. He's not on that level. He lost all his territory to Antigonus. So Antigonus is the king of the north. He has everything. At Sunday Law, Seleucus wins back territory.
Right.
That's why you have the papacy coming back in at Sunday Law as some kind of, I don't know what kind of union is going to happen. I don't think we know details on that yet, but based off
And Seleucus becomes the king of the north after Antigonus dies, doesn't he?
Yeah, so that totally makes sense. So
Well-
Seleucus does come back in full power
You're
as the
mixing-
king of the north.
You're mixing models though,
Mhm.
because at that point we're still using when Seleucus is the king of the north and you have the king of the south as Ptolemy. Then when we apply to that model, it's still the United States as the king of the north.
Right, because we switched perspectives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But can't you have multiple perspectives to tell different stories?
Right, but
Right.
what you're doing then is you're extending the line, and so you're going to have to figure out where to break it again and how to reapply it with Seleucus as the papal king of the north.
Because the only reason that Seleucus had anything is because Antigonus had helped him get Babylon. So he was an ally with
No, he took it back from Antigonus.
well, he left it.
Yeah,
He
because
left
he was
it.
busy fighting something else.
Well, he got nervous because Antigonus was killing everybody, so he left.
So when in 1945, when Germany lost the war, and the papacy attached himself to the wrong country, I'm just trying to figure this out in my head. They attached himself to the wrong country, and I forget the point I was going to make. Here it comes. It's coming. My mind just went totally blank for a sec.
You had like 3 king of the norths then, huh?
Well, okay. Oh, that's what it was. So 1799 is when the papacy died. That was the death. Was the resurrection when they became they were the counterfeit during World War I and World War II? So they resurrected at that time, right? We're not waiting for the resurrection of the papacy. It already happened back then. Is that right?
I don't know when they came back.
I don't know that it's a full resurrection because it hasn't gained the power that it used to have. So that's why we have the United States and Protestants representing the king of the north.
But they gained the power by attaching themselves to Germany, and they had power, but they failed because they picked the wrong country. So they must have been resurrected. You're not just dead and doing that.
Well, what kind of power are you saying that they have?
Yeah, because Hitler never let them do anything.
No, I know. Well,
I mean, because they used to have like crazy power, like world kingly power, right?
yeah, but it doesn't mean that they have to have that power again in order to be considered resurrected. They made the wrong choice during World War I. So what I'm thinking is, because they were resurrected, and Germany and the papacy were essentially the king of the north during that time, but they both failed. Germany failed to win the war, and the papacy failed to pick the right country. So now king of the north kind of floats in the air again until it becomes another country, which was the U.S. So the U.S. became the king of the north after that time. It's no longer Germany or the papacy.
Can I put an idea out there?
Yeah, for sure.
I think that this line is showing that at the Sunday Law, the big Sunday Law on the 144,000 line, the papacy actually legit resurrects again. And I think that's what its goal is to unite with the right king of the north and become that power once again. Do you know what I'm saying?
So
But I think those other 2 histories were a history of failure, and that never happened. They were trying to, but it just didn't work out. Because they had, just like World War in Diadochi War, you had an alliance at the beginning with the papacy and Germany, but then after that, Hitler wouldn't let them do anything, and he just used them for that initial step. But after that, he didn't let them do anything, and they never came back anyways because Germany lost. So I don't know. That's just how I'm seeing it, because they had 2 histories of failure, because it matches the same internally, right? Because we were supposed to accomplish something. Well, the Millerites were supposed to accomplish something and become the last generation, and they tried, but they failed, and it just never happened until now. It's finally happening because
So the king of the south, the King of the South died, right? 1989, or was wounded in 1989, died in 1991.
Right.
That was the USSR, resurrects as Russia. We know that it resurrects and fails, right?
Yeah.
So a resurrection doesn't mean that it succeeds.
It depends on what its job function is, because the King of the South's job function is to fail in the lines, because it's the King of the North who has to succeed. In the history of success, the job function of the King of the North is to beat the King of the South, but the King of the South has to win the first two battles, but then the King of the North has to win the last one.
So it doesn't count as a resurrection if you don't do your job after, like if you fail
I
at
think
doing
it's,
your job? Because we know that the papacy is going to fail at doing their job anyway, even after they resurrect.
yeah, I don't know now.
So I think it's still a resurrection. Like you count the resurrection even if they fail at whatever they're supposed to do. That's where I was kind of getting confused, because I was thinking that when she started bringing out the World War, like the papacy connection to the World Wars, I thought, are we now saying that the resurrection actually happened back then for the papacy? And because we, you know how Adventism always says the 1929 Lateran Treaty was the beginning of the healing of the wound, and then we're all still waiting for it to resurrect from that wound or whatever, but possibly it already happened. But maybe
I don't know where that would have been then.
Where they resurrected. It was in that history, the World War I and II history. That's the idea that I'm putting forth. And I don't know if that's what she's saying or not. Like because if they were playing an active role in global politics and they were literally tied to the Nazi party, how can we say that they were dead? Just because Hitler didn't allow them to do what they wanted to do, it doesn't mean that they were dead. Because if you look at the wound that they received in 1799, when the Pope was killed, the remaining, I don't know if they had other popes or there were bishops or something like that. They were all basically not locked up literally, but they were not allowed to leave the Vatican or something like that, I think, at that time for several years.
My question would be then, what does alive for the papacy look like?
Well, you're actually functioning in nations' governments. I mean, that's what they were doing through the 1260 years, and that's what they were doing through the World War I and World War II history. I mean, what do you think that it being alive looks like? If it wasn't, if it was a major influence in World War I and II, then it just seems odd that they would be considered dead at that time, not functioning.
Maybe some verses to look at is Revelation 17 there.
You want to explain?
No, I'm not. I'm just saying that that may be a place to go, because I don't know if that Babylon there, or that the whore there, is that whore the daughter, or is that whore the papacy? And they burn that city. I mean, that's something that we need to study as a parable. Because 17, for God hath put in their hearts to fulfill the 10 kings, to fulfill his will, and agree and give their kingdom unto the beast, unto the words of God shall be fulfilled. And the woman which thou sawest is that great city which reigneth over the kings of the earth. Is that modern Babylon? I mean, we've always known it to be the papacy, but I mean, is it modern Babylon? Maybe that's something to study out as a parable.
Yeah. Oh boy.
And also when you go into Revelation 18 too, with the destruction, something to be taken verse by verse, because 17 has been opening up a whole lot more. I mean, that's what led us to see who the U.S. is more so. Well, there's other places that we've seen that, but there's still things to be understood there.
If you go then by Revelation 18, because when I read through that one and the economic strength that helped all the other nations, it seems to be the U.S. From the way I read it. I don't know.
And the U.S., you're saying the U.S. is Babylon, right?
Yeah, in that context, that's what it seems to be. Because I don't. It says all the merchants that were made rich by your delicacies and all of these things, and
Yeah, that's right.
so-
That makes sense.
I'm just saying it's probably a place to that we could be looking.
Yeah. I don't know.
Also, Jeremiah, I want to say 49. It might start at 50, but it might start at 49 all the way to the end. Those would be some chapters to look at for this as well, because that's Revelation 18 going on as well.
It's where I get confused because I felt like I barely had a grasp of Revelation 17 before the light started opening up on it and then making it all completely different from what I always understood.
It's probably good that you didn't have a.
Maybe, but
You
it's
know?
like, yeah, but when you're just starting to grasp something and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, never mind all that, start over.
Yeah, but it's probably
Like,
good
oh.
that you didn't have it all down.
Yeah, but at the same time, you're just starting to get something, it's starting to make sense, and then you got to throw it out.
I know quite a while back, I was like probably at least a year ago, I messaged Parminder on that because I was in one of the studies with the African brethren, and that kind of led me to some other thoughts. And then I sent some questions to him, and it's like you can kind of see that when you really break it down, it is not what we always thought it was. When you take it verse by verse, it doesn't add up to being the papacy the way we thought. But where the papacy fits in it in the end, I don't know.
So when we look at I'm in the wrong one here. In 17, where it's talking about all the different kingdoms, then what's the order that we currently understand those to be? Like five is the papacy, right? And then 6 is the United States, 7 is the United States, and then wasn't the 8th is one of the, what was it, one of the 5 or something?
one of the 7.
One of the 7?
The 8th is of the 7.
Or the 8th is of the 7, yeah. So who is the 8th then?
That sounds like it would be the papacy then, because if it's one
Yeah.
of the 7 and it comes back at Sunday law.
That's what I've been thinking. Like, because we used to say that there was the UN, right? But we don't say that anymore.
Yeah, because the
Yeah,
US
so
is the one in charge of the UN, so you'd have that, and then you'd
Yeah.
have, because
The
the
eighth
UN,
was-
hold on a second, just hold on. The US in charge of the UN is the 7th kingdom. The US by itself is the 6th, but the US in charge of the UN, that's the 7th plus.
Yeah, you're right. So that actually consolidated the 7 and the 8 that we used to think, and now you have the 8th, which makes sense. It would be the papacy resurrected.
Wow.
Again, or whatever we want to call it, whatever.
Yeah.
You said at Sunday law is when the papacy kind of shows up again, right?
According to this line, yeah, it does look like Seleucus comes back and he gains territory, which in the maps, if you look at it, it's almost as big as Antigonus's territory. It looks like equal sizes of Antigonus and Seleucus.
Mm-hmm.
There's a map that shows them, but while they're both alive at the same time and both have their kingdom, they both look like they have like 2 huge kingdoms.
Yeah, I remember you showing that the other night.
Yeah.
What were you going to say, Elaine?
I don't remember.
Wow, that would make so much simple sense if that's true then. That would make Revelation 17 like so
That's funny because I can't believe that's what I was thinking. Was that earlier today or yesterday or something like that? And I'm like, there's no way there's no way I would I even understand what this is talking about, because I felt so confused about it. But when she started coming out with the United States, I was thinking the same thing. I was like, well, if it just becomes supreme, 6 to 7, it doesn't actually change the country. It's just changes what he controls, which is essentially the whole world minus the papacy.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I wonder if that will come out, or if we can write to Tess and
You have to follow the woman through. The mother of harlots you'd have to follow it through verse by verse. The mother of harlots, is she the woman all the way through, or is the woman changed? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know. That's where I find out. That's what I have a hard time grasping, is understanding this woman and the beast and who's writing who, and does it change? Written Mystery Babylon the Great.
Yeah, see, and if the eighth kingdom is of the seven, no, because it was so. Which kingdom are we saying is the papacy? It's the fifth kingdom, right?
Yeah.
And we're saying that the kingdom is the papacy. We're not saying that the kingdom is Europe being controlled by the papacy. We're saying the kingdom is the papacy.
The beast is the kings of Europe, united with the papacy.
Right, but we're looking at it like the heads. The fifth one, we keep calling it the papacy. Are we meaning to say that it's Europe being controlled by the papacy?
It's the kings of Europe.
A king and a kingdom are the same thing. It's the kings and their subjects, right?
Yeah. They're king.
You have to have one. You have to have them both. Otherwise, you don't have a kingdom.
And that's fine. I just know that I keep hearing everyone say that it's the papacy is the fifth one, but it's Europe that's the fifth one with the papacy in control.
It's the kings of Europe.
Yeah.
The papacy still has their kingdom, right? Even though they don't have, at that time it was Europe, but they still have their kingdom, their subjects, which would be 1 billion Catholics worldwide. Maybe.
Well, that would be what Elaine's saying, is that it's just always the woman that's always riding the beast.
Yeah, if you follow it through, it's a beast. And you got the beast, you go back to Revelation 12, telling you who Satan is, and we going into, it's verse 17, and then going into the spirit of prophecy to find that it's kingdoms, kings and governors and rulers. So then you follow the beast all the way through Revelation 13. You've got two beasts. That's the fifth and sixth head. So it's not the papacy, it's the kingdom that is but there's something different about that kingdom, because that kingdom was a union of church and state, and that's the image that this nation then copies. But the kingdom, the beasts are the kingdoms.
But who are you saying are the kingdoms?
They would be the kings of Europe in that period of time.
But also their subjects, right? Because the king and a kingdom are the same thing according to Daniel.
Yeah,
they have to be tied in together.
Yeah, I wasn't I didn't mean to separate that if it sounded like I was.
Yeah. I think though, because the Catholic Church I don't know that it has its own specific kingdom, because all of its subjects are the subjects of all these countries in Europe. Do you know what I'm saying? So they have to go under those laws. But because they have this belief system, the Catholic Church can use them to control those countries in Europe. Which is what's happening with the Protestants now. Their belief system they're using to control the government. But they're subjects of the United States. They're not their own kingdom.
But all you need is a king and a kingdom. You don't necessarily need a piece of land. God had his kingdom on this earth even when his people were scattered, didn't he? I don't know if that makes sense. Maybe not.
I'm not sure how that kingdom would work, because
where does Daniel 11:14 fit in here when the robbers of thy people come in? Am I not understanding that yet?
We didn't go into the application of that too much, I don't think.
Because that's in between Midnight Cry and Sunday Law.
What?
I am pretty sure that is before Sunday Law, when the robbers of thy people come in. You got to go back into I'll go back and look in Daniel and Revelation later tonight. But I'm pretty sure that's before Sunday Law.
You lost me.
Am I wrong? You sound surprised. Am I wrong? I know I'm pretty sure that's what I've heard it taught as well.
Yeah, that's the Battle of Panium.
Yeah.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, now I know what you're talking about. Raphia and Panium. Literal.
Hang on, I'll mute me. Sorry, guys.
What's Raphia? 11 to 13 or
11 to 12. 13 to 15 is Panium, but in the actual literal battle, do you guys remember it was because that child king was the one that Ptolemy, I forget his name, but it was the 5-year-old kid that was left after Ptolemy Philopator died after Raphia was won. So Rome came in to help that little kid, and they sent generals to help him fight in that battle, but he still lost. But I think the literal application that's talking about is Rome helping him, because they saw Antigonus and Philip of Macedonia come together against that kid, and they thought it was wrong. But do you check this out, because this is another one where you have the papacy being friends with the king of the south, just like you have Seleucus and Ptolemy. Do you realize that?
Yeah, I kind of know what you're talking about.
Yeah, so I think the papacy is gonna, because we saw that video and Tess said it in this, the papacy and the king of the south are having a friendship there, but
it's always for mutual. They each have something to gain from it, right? They're not friends, but they have something to gain from it.
I don't know what they had to gain. It was just a little kid that they were from this story. If you look at the story and in Uriah Smith, they were upset that at the immorality of the king of the north and the other guy coming down to fight against this vulnerable little kid. So they weren't really doing it as a means of gaining something. They were doing it more out of a sense of principle, I guess. A Roman idea of principle, whatever that might have been, but which kind of makes sense, because Francis, if you see the way he talks, I'm sure he has an agenda, but he's also, considering how the papacy has been so far, he's an oddball because of how liberal he is. That isn't a thing that happened before. That's why they have a huge civil war in the Catholic Church right now.
I wonder though if there was, like, if you go back into that history, and that's something that I guess we'll have to look at, is there were probably spheres of influence that were going to be affected by this kid ruler if he was going to get overthrown. So I wonder if, these countries that were coming to his aid, they, it may have been, they thought it was wrong, first of all, but there was also probably going to be a disruption in the area. It's all in that kind of.
Yeah, because of the unilateralness, right? You have the United States and our time trying to be unilateral, and the papacy is helping the only other power that can rival the U.S., so that it's not just a one world power.
Yeah, so they had to defend him. There was a political reason behind, not just a.
Wow. So I think that might be something that comes out. I think we're going to see the papacy help Russia out in Panium, but they're not going to win, just like in the actual battle. Ptolemy didn't win, but the papacy Rome tried to help him, but he didn't win. And I think that might happen again.
Well, remember we were seeing Putin going to the Vatican quite often lately.
Yeah.
Well, in verse 16 there, the 10 horns, which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire. That takes you back to Leviticus, to what happened to when the daughter of the priest was a whore. Because God had put in their hearts to fulfill his will and to agree to give their kingdom unto the beast. I'd say there's a lot still to be understood there.
And then verse 16 in Daniel 11 says, But he that cometh against him shall do according to his own will, and none shall stand before him, and he shall stand in the glorious land, which by his hand shall be consumed. I think that's going to where the papacy comes in.
Who's the he? The he that cometh?
If I remember right, in Daniel and Revelation, that goes to Rome. That skips like many, many years, and it goes to where Rome comes into the area and starts to take over.
Can you identify in that verse though? Like, there's the he that cometh, and then there's the him that he comes against. Who's who there? I have to go back and read it, I guess.
I have hold on, let me see.
That's where it gets complicated, when you're reading I remember the first time I studied this Daniel 11 stuff, just reading the history stuff from Uriah Smith, and it's like, okay, if you're trying to do it on your own, which I did at first, and found all the same kind of people, but you're trying to figure out who's the he and the him in half of these verses, because it goes back and forth and it spreads over a lot of time.
I can read it to you real quick.
Yeah.
Although Egypt could not stand before Antiochus, the king of the north, Antiochus could not stand before the Romans, who now came against him. No kingdoms were longer able to resist the rising power. Syria was conquered and added to the Roman Empire when Pompey, BC 65, deprived Antiochus Asiaticus of his possessions and reduced Syria to a Roman province. The same power was also to stand in the Holy Land and consume it. Rome became connected with the people of God, the Jews, by alliance, BC 162, from which date it holds a prominent place in the prophetic calendar. It did not, however, acquire jurisdiction over Judea by actual conquest until BC 63. And then in the following manner. And then it goes into this Pompey, which we went over this when they besieged the city and they wouldn't let him in, and there was Aristobulus, which was trying to fight against him. But basically it was when Pompey came and took Judea. So it's when you have the king of the north standing in the glorious land. And so if I go back, because he doesn't explain the he is and the him, but it says, but he that cometh against him shall do according to his own will, and none shall stand before him. Okay, so, but he, I think, is Rome, that cometh against him, which would be Antiochus, the king, the other king of the north, shall do according to his own will, and none shall stand before him, which is Rome. And he shall stand, which is Rome again, shall stand in the glorious land. So the first him is the only one that's referring to Antiochus, and then I think everything else is referring to Rome. By the context, it seems. Which would make sense. And see, let's take our parable understanding that we learned over the weekend, okay? And if you guys remember how Tabo did this, if you have someone coming and shall stand in the glorious land now, was he standing there before, or is this saying that he's been standing there? Because if he wasn't there, that means he has to come in from somewhere else. So he wasn't here. So it would be someone else. But if he has been standing here, that would be Protestants. Do you see what I'm saying?
Sounds like he's coming in, like he's arriving, not like he was standing there.
That's what I think too. So it can't be whoever's in here in this country now, because they're already here. I want to look at the Septuagint and see what that
verse again.
But he that cometh against him shall do according to his own will, and none shall stand before him. Oh, he cometh against him. So if Antiochus, the king of the north, if in this perspective it's going to represent the U.S., and he's coming against the U.S., he can't stand before him, and he's going to stand in the glorious land. So it sounds like it is someone from outside coming into the glorious land and taking it over. Or is it just me?
What does it mean, none shall stand before him?
No, that's what we think.
No one is strong enough to me. I mean, I don't know, but no one can stand before him.
Who are you saying comes into the U.S.?
Papacy.
Papacy, and no one can stand before him? I wonder if it's tied into the climate change thing. This is where I'm still a little bit standoffish against it. Not that I doubt the climate change, nothing to do with that. But because it's something that people all can come together on. That's the fear that I have with everything that's going on. And, I'm a little bit hesitant to jump onto the Greta bandwagon. Not because I think anything wrong with her, but the thing is you can see all these people that are coming together on this one issue. And I don't know if I still have too much of the old perspective mixed in there, but because the papacy is tied into all this, I don't think we've discarded the papacy yet. So I feel like there's still a big twist that's going to happen after all this stuff kind of goes down. And I can see climate change still playing a big part of that. I just don't understand how to look at it.
I think because if you look at it, the papacy is also saying that he's trying to unite everyone on the issues of these nationalistic leaders being bad too. So I don't know if you can say it that way, because he's trying to be a counterfeit And by being a counterfeit, he's trying to stand for the right issues that we are standing for.
I'll tell you what, when we left your house there, Adriana,
Yeah.
and it was raining hard,
Yeah.
I told Christine, I go, it feels like a tornado. And we were actually stuck in something called a gustnado. And it's like a whirling tornado, but with rain in it. And the rain was so hard that it was pushing all the cars to the side of the road.
Oh, wow.
And it was, I couldn't even see the lines anymore. It was so thick. And then come to find that the next day they had a tornado touchdown in Davis. And,
Tornadoes in California are unheard of until just recently.
yeah. And we were actually driving in the tornado while it was raining. And it was pushing our car from side to side. And it was actually, the rain was hitting sideways. It was coming sideways. It wasn't coming down. It was coming sideways, hitting the side windows. And it was the freakiest thing. And we saw power lines arcing in the distance.
Oh, that's scary.
Yeah.
Well, Lord, you guys are fine.
Yeah, we were like, oh my God, I was getting ready to pull over off to the side, and then it kind of let up. Then we just drove through it.
When it comes to weather, this is like the new norm. It's crazy.
Yeah, I've never seen anything like that. I've been in a lot of rainstorms, but I ain't never seen nothing like that ever.
Is this what the CNN was reporting just yesterday or today? Today in the morning, I think I saw on CNN was a report
about a tornado touching down in Davis, California.
Yes.
Yeah, yes. That happened was it this morning? This morning and
yesterday.
No, Sunday morning. That happened Sunday morning, but we were driving home on Saturday, and when we were in one.
And it dumped like 4 to 6 inches of hail on the freeway, which is, it looked like they were driving through snow. I've seen hail out there before, but not that thick.
What time did you guys leave?
We left it was right after 6:30.
Oh, just right after I did then. Yeah, because I made it home, but what passed through you passed through here, but I didn't see, well, I wasn't outside and it was dark. But it just suddenly started to literally pour down rain and thunder and lightning.
Oh yeah, it was thundering all the way and lightning all the way home. And then 20 minutes before we got to our house, it was cloudy, but not a drop of rain at our house. So we made it okay and all that.
Praise the Lord.
Yeah, but that was some scary rain. I had never seen anything like that. It was actually sideways and spinning. It was spinning around the car. That's what it was weird. It was just weird.
I think because I've been trying to look into some of this stuff, when it comes to climate change, the scientific ideas on it, not just from our lines. And I think the thing that some people have issues with is there's sometimes a lull of any bad weather within a few years, so people think everything is fine, but then you have bad weather again. And you look at short time periods of time, but when you take the actual large scale of it over hundreds of years, it's been getting worse and worse. So the science for that is there. I have a hard time, honestly, understanding a lot of that mumbo jumbo because I don't understand some of the language that they use. But based off of our lines, and based off of what Ellen White says, we know that she says that the earth is in like birthing pains, and it's moaning and groaning, and the four winds are being held back. The four winds of destruction are being held back. And I know we have like an idea. This is my issue is in my mind, it's like a literal thing that there's four angels holding back like winds and hail and all those things, but that's a symbolic wordage to explain something literal that's going to happen at some point, and the literal application of what it's actually going to look like. We know the earth is going to be destroyed, and it's going to completely start to fall apart. When it comes to the Greta girl, she's awesome and stuff. She can be really intense sometimes, and I struggle with her on some of that issues, but I'm pretty sure she's on the right side of it. And the youth, the fact that they're coming up, there is a spot for them to do a work. I don't think it's what we always thought it was with the finish it, because I don't see that quote anywhere. So I think we finagled that saying in our brain somehow.
Like the thought I'm having is it's not about whether climate change is real or not. Like I actually was reading a conversation somewhere on Facebook earlier today, and I heard a woman made a statement that helped me a lot, because I was struggling big time just this week with the whole climate change thing, because with this whole Greta thing coming out, I'm just like, it seems like a lot of people who, like, I just reading conversations and stuff like that, and people who are saying like, oh, I've always been totally ignorant to climate change. I just denied it, for whatever reason. And now, like I see it's real, and they're just pushing the agenda. And it's like, well, your mind doesn't change, and then all of a sudden, everything in a week. You're still just speculating, right? Like most people are still speculating. And from my memory, like long before I was a Christian, I grew up in the world and I was liberal. My parents raised me liberally, and that's more or less the way it was. And I went to public school, and we went through all these different, it's like every decade there was a climate scare that never came to fruition. Like in the 80s, it was acid rain, and you never hear about acid rain anymore. And then you got into the 90s, and it was the hole in the ozone layer. And now the hole in the ozone layer is gone. So I guess we fixed that one. And then you have Al Gore in the early 2000s came out with An Inconvenient Truth, and then we all thought that that Greenland was going to melt and stop the ocean convection, and Europe was going to have a nuclear winter and all this stuff, and that never came. Oh, and New York was going to be underwater by 2015. So I was reading this, so I've been struggling with that, because it's like, you don't need to hear conspiracy theories to realize that these predictions that were made consistently decade after decade, they weren't coming true. It had nothing to do with conspiracy theories, so they weren't coming true. But this.
So you don't think pollution is a problem?
That's absolutely not what I said.
No, I'm asking you.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying is that's not what I'm saying at all. Like, because the pollution is obviously a problem, but why did where did these things go, and why did like Al Gore, who made billions of dollars by saying that New York by 2015 that New York would be underwater. And it's not even close to even happening. So why are these things constantly being perpetuated?
Because the four winds are being held back, isn't it? Because it looks like it should fall apart any second.
Well,
they're wake people up, but God is merciful, I think.
I just wanted to finish the point I was making, because the conversation I was reading today was, I finally heard a decent explanation, and I don't know if it's completely does it away for me, but it was one of the best explanations I'd ever heard. Was that when scientists are coming up with the scientists are coming up with their what do you call it, like their studies or whatever,
theories.
The problem that happens, well, they know these things are happening, like they're putting all this information together, and they know that there's a climate issue right now. The scientists know there's a climate issue, like the majority of them, there's a consensus on there being a climate problem. But the problem is it all comes through interpretation again, right? So the scientific information gets passed on to the media, and the media exploits that information and blows it up into something different.
Yeah.
So then it kind of discredits the actual information that there is indeed a problem there, but they're blowing it up to such a proportion for whatever reason, to make a news story or something like that, to get people all hyped up because it gets people spending money. Whatever reason they do it, and then you end up with this whole group of people that are like objecting to this whole idea now, because the same reason I was, because they're saying, well, look at history. You know, they predicted these things over and over again, and it didn't come true. But are we really reading the scientific information, or are we just getting scientific information with like a spin on it from the media? So she said there is indeed a serious problem with the climate right now, but people are having a hard time believing it because of this. So I'm thinking, well, okay, that's the case. That makes a lot of sense to me, that we're not trusting the scientists because of what the media did. It's not because of what the scientists did. They were right. So with that being said, climate change is real. This is something that I completely have turned around on. Still have a couple of hangups, but now, so with all that being said, this whole Greta thing came out, and then all of a sudden you have a bunch of people who were always on the opposite side, and now they're saying, just because it's almost like running with something a little bit too quickly. Like Greta, it's all very emotional. She hasn't really said anything that the scientists haven't been saying for a long time, but now people are getting tied into the emotional aspect of it. And I'm not saying she's wrong or bad or anything like that. It seems like it's gaining a lot of traction. When that happens, whenever that type of thing happens, that the hair on the back of my neck stands up. I'm like, okay, everyone's kind of flocking together on this thing. And it seems like a lot of people aren't really thinking, they're not really thinking it through. It's an emotional thing. It may not be wrong, but for me, I have to step back and say, okay, it's kind of like everything that happened with this movement a month ago. You got to step back and wait for the dust to settle, because when the dust settles, things are going to look different than they did the first day that it kind of came about. And that's what we're starting to see now. So I don't know what, because I've been questioning what the papacy's role is in everything. And the papacy is very much tied into the whole climate agenda. The whole Laudato Si was about climate change and all this stuff. So, and then, this girl is meeting with the Pope and everything like that. So I'm thinking, if the Pope is no longer, like, it was just like this big thing that was going to be a hard test for us, but we accept that the Pope was not a bad guy in the end, and it was all the Protestant church, then that would make sense. Okay, then maybe the climate change isn't a big deal. But because I wasn't sure what the Pope's role was going to be in the end, if they were just completely done away with, or they do come back, then that's going to dictate to me what do we do with climate change? Because it's not about it being a conspiracy theory. It's just about, is it a ploy to get people from all walks of life onto the same page about something? Like to let their guard down and kind of come together on something. I'm thinking, well, we got to be careful that we don't just run with something without fully understanding it. That's just my thing.
Jonathan, I understand your concern and your question. And I was thinking, like, from my perspective, to me, it looks like that in this movement, there's two extremes. That everything about climate change is, the climate change is right. Like we should accept everything. Like, there's really the carbon emission that is man-made. That is that's mostly by human contribution, or there's no climate change whatsoever. And I think that the truth is actually somewhere in between, meaning that it's true that there is the carbon emission is higher now. And it's true that the greenhouse effect is really greenhouse effect. But the thing is that, like, to me, and I don't want to, I don't want to say that this is a right view, and this is just purely, I just sharing my opinion on this. You can argue that the climate change, the global warming may not necessarily be purely man-made, meaning that there is cosmic contributions. Like, for example, at some point our Earth, from what I understand in Revelation, our Earth is going to become a neutron star, meaning that it will totally, for the Earth to burn up, you have to become a neutron star. So there are things that are also that are not quite like black and white, that is purely and totally man-made. But I totally agree that the pollution is absolutely, it's a man-made. It's the human contribution is the leading cause of the pollution. And the pollution also in terms of CO2, that leads to greenhouse effect. That's also true. I mean, at least that's how I perceive it. But I think that there's also things that are not, because scientists, they don't know everything, and besides, they are working from based on the theories that they have developed at some point. And if you notice now that there's many theories that are being right now challenged, or like, for example, Einstein, he's brilliant, but there are many things that he has theorized, and they were proven to be wrong. Well, I wouldn't say many, but there is a number of them. So what I'm trying to say is that scientists, they try to do their best based on what what they can learn, and we don't know everything. Scientists don't know. I mean, just the very theories that are guiding scientists to certain conclusions may not be correct. So to say that the climate change is not real is wrong. Definitely there is climate change. Climate change is happening. But to say that all of the climate change is due to the human contribution and 100% is our fault, I'm not quite convinced of it. Because, for example, there is evidence, but then again, I believe that there is a huge contribution from the cosmic, the things that are out of our control, things that are not, in the changes in the solar system that are not related to the human, that what we, to our life, to the fact that we're living here and, burning up oxygen and accumulating CO2 and so on, So this is my view, and I don't mean that I don't know if it's, I don't know how much of this is true or how much of this is not true, but one thing is certain, that there is definitely climate change. Except that there is some people, or many people probably tend to blame it on purely on human human factor. But I don't think it's that purely black and white. But it's definitely, the pollution wise, like for example, everything that Trump is doing, it's all related to pollution. And I mean, it's all contributing to the pollution. So in that sense, prophetically, it is very important, I believe. But to say that all of it is man-made, all of it is purely, on us, we don't know much. There's many things that we don't know even about our solar system. And if you know that the solar system itself is not just simply, isolated, it's all part of a bigger system, and there's things that are going on that it's out of our control. So this is my opinion. I don't know. So I really don't like to argue or talk about this kind of things, but I think that it's, to say that like, for example, some of the people in the media that say that, oh, it's all, purely man-made. I don't know. I can't say that, because none of us can truly say that it is truly so. Because also that we know that the things, for example, the things like in Revelation, that it describes that the the star that fell, whose name is Apollyon. And I know there's probably some symbolic explanation and so on, but the very fact that it mentions something like that, it's purely on a very basic level. You can imagine that it is a meteorite or some kind of celestial body. So to say that it's, you know, I can't really say that it's totally 100% man-made, but I do think that the pollution, which is the most visible, which is most obvious, is definitely man-made. And yeah, so.
I think we're all in agreement that climate change is happening. An explanation that I heard about that whole CO2 thing is that the plants in this planet make the majority of the CO2 when they die, but when they come back, they resolve it all over again. So they have it has a perfect system of balance, but what humans are doing, they're contributing an extra percentage to that the earth can't sustain. So slowly it builds up over time.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like the natural world would have a way of producing the right amount of carbon that it can actually regenerate into oxygen or whatever it is that it does. But it's because we inject something into the whole cycle that wasn't natural, that actually causes it to kind of get messed up. So I totally believe in that. I believe I believe it is the biggest issue that we're dealing with right now. And that's a complete reverse of what I believed just a few months ago. So it's not, for me, it's nothing to do with the science or the climate change or anything. It has more to do with the papacy and the movement like the movement for climate change, because I see it's a good thing. And that's what the devil doesn't take a bad thing and get everyone on board. He takes a good thing and he gets everybody on board. And that's what I'm concerned about. It's just, whoa, there's a lot of hype. You know, it's like it's like a shark frenzy. You throw a piece of meat in the water and everything's going crazy. And it's like, you don't want to get in the middle of that because you can't see anything. You know, it's like, I want to step back and just wait for the dust to settle to see who is Greta. You know, I've known her I've known who she was for quite a while. But now she's really making headlines and I want to know, who is she? What is really going on here? Why is the papacy so serious about climate change? Is the papacy still a part of prophecy? So for me, it's more to do with prophecy than it is climate change. Just what is going to happen here? And we need to just be careful that we don't just pick up the ball and run with it without really knowing what the ball is.
I think that's a legit way to think of it because, yeah, I don't know. To me, I don't know. She seemed intense, but I don't feel like I can make a sound decision without knowing more right now.
Yeah, it's just a lack of information. So yeah. I don't like to make a decision without more information on it at this point.
Yeah, because the left also, because they don't see that God is in this also. So they have a limited view of certain things.
Yeah.
With what they do have, but
yeah. And you also take the fact that, you know, that the other side is saying that we're saying CNN is godly. We're not saying that any more than we're saying that she may have everything right. But when you look at it from the perspective of what's plowing the Nethinims, you know, they have extremes and wrongs that have gone on in climate change, but there's got to be a portion of it that has something to do. That's what it looks like anyways. A portion of it that has something to do with bringing the people to see that we're destroying the planet, at what level, you know, and whatever fanaticism people take it to, but that we are doing a destruction on the planet.
Yeah, I was wondering about that because the other issue that I have is there are going to be natural disasters. People are going to see it and they are going to be forced to believe in it. But at the end of the world, people are going to look at us and blame us for it. So they'll be combined, you know, for the fact that it's happening, but they'll see us as the cause of it. So even though they have the right stance, they're going to use it for the wrong reason. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So like, while the right, and this seems contradictory that they do this to me, that Protestants do this, or evangelicals, whatever we are calling them now, they'll say that there's no such thing as climate change, but then they'll see that there are judgments of God, but they'll attribute those judgments on the wrong reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll know that there's judgments of God. They have that correct. There are judgments going on, but they'll say it's happening because of this other people, not those people.
Just like they had a
Yes.
Civil War.
That's
If
that's a
do you
very
guys
good
mind
analogy.
a lot of people left. Do you mind if we close in prayer and we can exit out? And if you want to jump back on, you can talk. That way I can start letting this do the conversion.
Okay.
Is that okay? Brother Jonathan, you want to pray?
Sure. Dear gracious Heavenly Father, Lord, we just want to thank you. Thank you, first of all, for the presentation that we received tonight. We know that these studies come from you, Lord, and they're a part of the Midnight Cry, which we are in right now. And the Midnight Cry is very large, Lord, and it requires many minds to come together to understand and to put these things together, and that we can help one another. So for that, Lord, I thank you for Brother Francisco's presentation tonight, Lord, and for each person who's been stepping up to try to present, to try to understand these messages. Lord, it seems like we can study one thing and it can lead us to many other questions that we have about a million other things. And as we've always said, it's like the more we learn, it seems like the more questions we have or the less we feel like we know. But we know, Lord, that you're fulfilling all things and that this Midnight Cry is performing its designed purpose. And we still don't fully understand it, Lord, but we know that all things come in due time, as you told us in Ecclesiastes. So, Lord, I just pray that we'll continue to strive to learn this message, to learn how to teach it, and to share our questions, Lord, and to have these conversations more and more. Lord, I also want to pray for the upcoming plan to study the methodology together. It seems like everything, again, is happening in the appointed time, Lord, and now is the right time for these things to happen. And I pray that each person will put the time in to prepare for these Sabbath presentations, because this is something that we've all expressed was on our heart. So I pray that that we are doing your will, Lord, and that we are following along just as we're supposed to, even though sometimes we feel that we're walking up a stairwell without a guardrail, Lord, and we're unsure, but we know that we can trust your word and your promises, Lord, that you've guided us this far, and all we need to do is look back and see that light that's shining from the Midnight Cry that's guiding our path for us. So, Lord, I thank you for each person here. I thank you for the ones that are still hanging on. So each day we see more people falling off. But Lord, it's only going to be you that's going to be glorified, and only you that's going to deserve the praise from all this, Lord, because you're going to show what you can do with a small group of people in the end of the world, Lord. So we look forward to that. We look forward to being a part of that. I pray that we will all be a part of that, Lord. And we will praise you and we'll give honor to you for all eternity, Lord, for what you're going to do. So with that, Lord, I thank you and we love you, Lord, and we pray all these things in the precious name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Amen.